Oh, and good evening. It's October 28th, 2025. We're continuing our discussion collection in our Outside the Class series. This series, from the Bible Project, covers the entire TaNaK, also known as the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament. Those source videos are available for your review on TheDustyFeet.com in the Outside the Class section. Because the intent of Outside the Class is for you to listen to that in-class lecture first. These we try to keep to about 15 minutes and make them easy to catch up on. So we're on a quest, scroll by scroll, book by book, a journey through this collection, but maybe with just a fun and different twist. Our hope with the Dusty Feet is to foster discussion and to help build and support communities. If you're not already connected to a community or just want to share and interact, this community has 4 primary ways to interact. 1. TheDustyFeet.com. That's our primary place to find everything. You are always free to comment. 2. Substack. Link is in the description below. It's designed around the written and spoken text. It's a place to connect to ourselves and others. 3. Facebook at The Dusty Feet. These videos and other videos are also available for comment and discussion. 4. And as always, you're welcome to send an email to bob@thedustyfeet.com. These places, they will be moderated and guidelines will be set to ensure healthy, safe discussion. And as always on the Dusty Feet, this is a place where we can safely explore the endless ways of God and the interconnection of His creation. Belief understandings may be challenged, divine misunderstandings may exist, and traditional teachings might falter as we pursue connection, context, and community with God and each other here, an environment of grace and love. Oh, and of course, before we forget, if you do find these kinds of podcasts useful, it's when you click the subscribe button. The reminders, they're just there to help you. But also, if you think this will be useful to others, then please, that is do when you click that like button, because that is how YouTube chooses to share these to more people if they wish. In this series, we're going to cover the entire TaNaK, right, the Old Testament, but we're going to do it in the original order of the Hebrew Scriptures. And you need to remember also the videos we're going to discuss are just the tip of the iceberg. They are part of our learning series. I highly recommend. And all of them can be found, and they're all available on the Bible Project's website. Because we're going to ask many questions about all kinds of things. Answers? We'll see. So Samuel, first scroll. It's our part 28, yeah? So in our last episode, we left off with Nabal having done, especially in hindsight, a very foolish thing. But I don't think it's unexpected, maybe not even unrealistic, because he just chose a side that he was going to be on. He chose Saul. That was foolish. But Abigail, his wife, hears the story told by the young men who are actually in the fields, right? The shepherds returning with their flock. And she realizes the treatment of the servants of David. She sees the error of Nabal's ways, and she rushes to avoid the response from David. Like we talked about last week, she loaded up a lot of stuff. She sends it on ahead of her down the road. It's heading down the road to run into David. David stops in the road, and he sees Abigail coming. Then Abigail gets to him, and she lays it all out to David, right? We start in verse 23. When Abigail saw David, she hurried, dismounted from her donkey, and fell on her face in front of David, bowed herself to the ground. She fell at his feet and said, "On me alone, my lord, be the blame. Please let your slave speak to you. Listen to the words of your slave. Please do not let my lord pay attention to this worthless man, Nabal, for his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name. Stupidity is with him. But I, your slave, did not see the young men from my lord who you sent. Now then, my lord, as Yahweh lives, and as your soul lives, since Yahweh has restrained you from shedding blood and from avenging yourself by your own hand, now then, may your enemies seek those who seek evil against my lord, be like Nabal. And now let this gift which your servant has brought to my lord be given to the young men who accompanied you. Please forgive the offense of your slave, for Yahweh will certainly make for my lord an enduring house, because my lord is fighting the battles of Yahweh, and evil will not be found in you all your days. Should anyone rise up to pursue you, seek your life, then the life of my lord shall be bound in the bundle of living with Yahweh your God. But the lives of your enemies, they will sling out as from the hollow of a sling. And when Yahweh does for my Lord in accordance with all the good that he has spoken concerning you, and he appoints you rule over Israel, this will not become an obstacle for you, or a troubled heart to my Lord, both by having shed blood without cause, and by my Lord's having avenged himself. When Yahweh deals well with my Lord, may you then remember your slave. So it seems that Abigail gets it. Abigail realizes that her husband has made a very foolish mistake. It's going to cost him his life. And there's something here I'd like to take a quick detour on. It's about intercession, right? Putting yourself between you and another. Of course, our most prominent pictures for this are Moses, obviously the Messiah, but there are several times in Scripture when someone else jumps in between, stands in the gap, as it were. And here, Abigail does it. She steps in between David and her husband. I mean, she's even going so far as to say, "On me alone, my Lord, be the blame." David listens to Abigail. He accepts her plea, right? Spares Nabal's life. And we also might be aware that there were still all those other men that David had rashly mentioned did not need to live. They lived too. But Abigail returns home. She finds her husband drunk after a party, and Abigail, she doesn't tell him right away, right, while he's drunk, what she did. She waits until the next day, when he's sober, probably hungover. But Nabal's reaction is interesting because, as far as it appears to me, of course, this is up for discussion, although I think it's also not necessarily important detail, just one of passing interest to me. But I take it that Nabal, he might actually have had a stroke, right? The news, well, it affected him that much. But the story says, and then 10 days later, Nabal dies. How you choose to look at it, it's God who takes care of him either way, but it's not at the vengeful hand of David. So then David takes note, because again, as we've seen and we're discussing this, we're watching these little sub-stories that reflect David's character. Maybe we could look at it as maybe building a character portrait of David. It's already been developing, because today we have a particular view of who will be the future King David, right? If you ask different people, even amongst theologians, they're probably going to come up with something slightly different. But I think within these, we get a chance to see David's reactions. And sometimes in those actions, we see the noble side of David. Sometimes we see a selfish side of David. Sometimes we see a benevolent side of David. Sometimes we see an arrogant side of David. And I think within that, we still see a cultural side of David, right? This little bit with Abigail, right here at the end of chapter 25. It's something we need to keep note of, I think, if we're keeping track of things, because we have practices of the day and maybe how they affected individual lives. I think we need to remember that David is married to Saul's daughter, right? Michal, right? It's even one of the reasons that Saul refers to David as my son, right? Because he's Saul's son-in-law. And yet, while David is on the run from his father-in-law, while he's out, he marries Ahinoam of Jezreel. So now that's 2 wives. Now we get to a third. It's in verse 39. When David heard that Nabal was dead, he said, "Blessed be Yahweh, who has pleaded the cause of the shame inflicted on me by the hand of Nabal, and has kept back his servant from evil. Yahweh has also returned the evildoing of Nabal on his own head." Then David sent a proposal to Abigail to take her as his wife. So keep that in mind. And I think it might give us reason to pause sometimes. We tend to ignore things like these when we try to reconcile the other ways we view David, especially when we hear God calling him a man after my own heart, and we see his choices played out. But as we roll to the next chapter, we almost see this cycle of wash, rinse, repeat, right? The Ziphites go to Saul and they basically say, hey, David's not keeping himself hidden. He's in the hills near us. So Saul, he gathers 3,000 men to pursue David. You know, that guy who said he wasn't going to chase down the other guy anymore. But David had already sent out, and they use the word spies. I tend to lean towards, at least in today's military vernacular with me, we would call them scouts. Here, scouts are spies, same deal. David gets his military intelligence that Saul's out to get him again. So David spies out. He finds where Saul is staying. Saul is staying in the middle of a camp. There are people all around him. So David takes a lay of the land, returns back to his camp. Back there he says, who will go with me to Saul in the camp? And Abishai, he says, I'll go down with you. So he and Abishai sneak down to the camp. Nobody sees him. Abishai says, let me kill him. God handed him over to you, and I can kill him with one thrust. It will not take two. So here again, Saul is out to kill David, and there's probably no doubt that Saul would kill David if he found him right there. But David again, he reiterated that it's God who will need to take care of this business, not him. Right? It starts in chapter 29, right, in verse 9. But David said to Abishai, do not kill him. For who can reach out with his hand against Yahweh's anointed and remain innocent? But David also said, as Yahweh lives, Yahweh certainly will strike him, or it comes day that he dies, or he'll go down in battle and he'll perish. But Yahweh forbid that I would reach out with my hand against Yahweh's anointed. But now please, take the spear that's at his head and that jug of water, and let's go. So David took the spear and the jug of water that were in Saul's head, and they left. No one saw or knew about it, nor did anyone awaken, for they were all asleep, because a deep sleep from Yahweh had fallen on them. Yeah. David doesn't get a word from God that he's putting everyone into a deep sleep. This is just David in action, making choices along the way, even with this ill-advised counsel of the man who took along with him. Yeah. David sneaks away with the spear and the water jug, and David goes on a hilltop across from the camp, a distance away, it says, and he hollers at them from this echoing voice that's going down into that valley, and he's talking to the people down there. In particular, he addresses the head of the king's guard, Abner. Remember, he's the one in that circle with Saul. They're all sleeping. Abner is the head of the king's guard. Because what David basically tells him is, hey, you're the king's guard. I have the king's spear. I wonder if that's the one that's already been thrown at David more than once. He might recognize it. And the water jug, right? Last seen at the head of them both while they were sleeping. Because David says, hey, you're the king's guard, and yet probably has snuck in somebody has snuck in, taken him, which means you probably didn't protect him, which means you all deserve to die. Saul, he's waking up. He hears the voice. He recognizes it as David's, and David again lays out his plea and the question, what have I done to deserve this? Starts in verse 18. He also said, why then is my Lord pursuing his servant? For what have I done? For what evil is in my hand? Now then, please let my lord the king listen to the words of his servant. If Yahweh has incited you against me, may accept an offering. But if it is people, cursed are they before Yahweh, because they have driven me out today so that I would have no share in the inheritance of Yahweh, saying, Go, serve other gods. Now then, do not let my blood fall on the ground far from the presence of Yahweh, for the king of Israel has come out to search for a single flea, just as one would search for partridge in the mountains. So then David does something that's a little interesting to me. He basically says, oh, and by the way, hey, send one of your guys over. I'm going to give you your spear back. I just wonder how that resonated with the people around as they were listening. Because I encourage you to read the end of that chapter, along with the whole scroll, because what you basically have is the same thing that went on before. They're both saying things. David saying, I could have killed you, but I didn't. Saul saying, I've made a mistake. I realize, David, you are Yahweh's anointed. And they both go their separate ways. And then we begin chapter 27, and there's two little parts that interested me. One, there was a phrase that leapt into my mind, right? It says, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Yeah. I've heard it before, and I was intrigued by it, but in this context, it really leaves you scratching your head, because at the beginning of chapter 27, we hear this. Then David said to himself, now I will perish one day by the hand of Saul. There's nothing better for me than to escape into the land of the Philistines safely. Then Saul will despair of searching for me any more in the territory of Israel, and I will escape from his hand. So you see, it seems the same group of people, with that other big story we have with David about a confident, large man in a sling. And that draws us to this point. So yeah, sometimes these stories are not as simple as we make them out to be. As my wife and I often find out in some of the murder mysteries we enjoy watching, especially the ones developed in other countries, that the good guys, they're often not all good. And the bad guys, well, they're often not all bad. Well, that probably just gives us more to ponder, yeah? So thanks for with us tonight on another episode of Outside the Class, as we approach the last couple of chapters in this first scroll of Samuel, and we're going to see surprising ways God is involved with this intriguing life of the soon-to-be King David on the Dusty Feet.